Chapter 24. Occupancy. Richard, it transpired, had been looking in the attic. Cyrus said he had found him up there, covered in dust, no doubt looking for more relics of the Black family to hide in his cupboard. Though Cyrus seemed satisfied with his story, it made Harry uneasy. Creature seemed to be in a better mood on his reappearance. His bitter muttering had subsided somewhat, and he submitted to order more docilely than usual, though once or twice Harry caught the house elves staring avidly at him, always looking quietly away when he saw that Harry had noticed. Harry did not mention his vague suspicions to Cyrus, whose cheerfulness was evaporating fast now that Christmas was over. As the date of their departure back to Hogwarts drew nearer, he became more and more prone to what Mrs. Weasley called fit of the sulens, in which he would become taciturn and grumpy, often withdrawing to Buckbeak's room for hours at a time. His gloom swayed through the house, oozing under doorways like some noxious gas so that all of them become infected by it. Harry did not want to leave Cyrus all alone again with only Creature for company. In fact, for the first time in his life, he was not looking forward to returning to Hogwarts. Going back to school would mean placing himself once again under the tyranny of Dolores Umbridge, who had no doubt managed to force through another dozen decrees in their absence. Then there was no Quidditch to look forward or now what he has been banned. There was every likelihood that their burden of homework would increase as the exam drew nearer. Dumbledore remained as remote as ever. In fact, if it had not been for DA, Harry felt he might have gone to Cyrus and begged him to let him leave Hogwarts and remain in Grimmauld Place. Then, on the very last day of the holiday, something happened that made he positively dread his return to school. Harry dear, said Mrs. Weasley, putting her head into his and Ron's bedroom, where the pair of them were playing wizard chess watched by Hermione, Ginny and Crookshank. Will you come down to the kitchen? Professor Snape would like a word with you. Harry did not immediately register what she had said. One of his castles was engaged in a violent tussle with the pawn of Ron's and he was engaging it on enthusiastically. Squash him. He's only a pawn, you idiot. Sorry, Mrs. Weasley, what did you say? Professor Snape dear, in the kitchen, he'd like a word. His mouth fell open in horror. He looked around at Ron and Hermione and Ginny, all of whom were gaping between them. Crookshank, whom Hermione had been restraining with difficulty for the past quarter of an hour, leapt gracefully upon board and said voices running for cover. Squalling at the top of their voices, Snape said Harry blankly. Professor Snape dear, said Mrs. Weasley reprovingly. Oh, come on, quickly, he said. He can't stay long. What he wanted with you, said Ron, looking unnerved as Mrs. Weasley withdrew from the room. You haven't done anything, have you? No, said Harry intelligently, racking his brain to think what he could have done that would make Snape pursue him to Grimmauld Place. Had his last piece of homework perhaps earned a tea? He paused, opened the kitchen door a minute or two later to find Sirius and Snape both seated at the long kitchen table, glaring in opposite directions. The silence between them was heavy with mutual dislike. A letter lay open on the table in front of Cyrus, said Harry to announce his presence. Snape looked around at him, his face framed between curtain of greasy black hair. Sit down, Potter. You know, said Cyrus loudly, leaning back on his rear chair leg and speaking to the ceiling. I think I had prefer it if you didn't give orders here, Snape. It's my house, you see. A ugly flush served Snape's pale face. Harry sat down in a chair beside Cyrus, facing Snape across the table. I was supposed to see you alone, Potter, said Snape, the familiar sneer curling his mouth. But Black, I'm his godfather, said Cyrus louder than ever. I'm here on Dumbledore's order, said Snape, whose voice, by contrast, was becoming more and more quietly whoppish. But by all means stay. Black, I know you like to feel involved. What's that supposed to mean? Said Sirius, letting his chair fall back onto all four legs and a loud bang. Merely that I am sure you must feel frustrated by the fact that you can do nothing useful. Snape laid a delicate stress on the word for the order. It was Sirius' turn to flush. Snape's lip curled in triumph as he turned to Harry. The headmaster has sent me to tell you, Potter, that it is his wish for you to study occlumency this term. Study what? Said Harry blankly. Snape's sneer became more pronounced. Occlumency, Potter. Magical defense of the mind against external penetration and obscure branch of magic, but highly useful one. Harry's heart began to pump very fast indeed. Defense against external penetration, but he was not being possessed. They had all agreed on that. Why do I have to study thing? He blurted out. Because the headmaster thinks it is a good idea, said Snape smoothly. You will receive private lesson once a week, but you will not tell anybody what you are doing. Least of all, Dolores Umbridge, you understand? Yes, said Harry, who is going to be teaching me. Snape raised an eyebrow. He said. Harry had the horrible sensation that his inside were melting. Extra lesson with Snape. What on earth had he done to deserve this? He looked quietly around at Cyrus for support. Why can't Dumbledore teach Harry? Asked Sirius aggressively. Why you? I suppose because it is a headmaster's privilege to delegate less enjoyable tasks, said Snape silkily. I assure you I don't beg for this job. He got to his feet. I will expect you at 6 o'clock on Monday evening, Potter, my office. If anybody asks you are taking remedial potion, nobody who has seen you in my class could deny you need them. He turned to leave, his black traveling clock billowing behind him. Wait a moment, said Sirius, sitting up straighter in his chair. Snape turned back to face them, sneering. I'm in rather a hurry. Black, unlike you, I do not have unlimited leisure time. I'll get to the point then, said Cyrus. Standing up, he was rather taller than Snape, who, Harry noticed, had balled his fist in the pocket of his cloak over what Harry was sure was the handle of his wand. If I hear you are using this occlumency lesson to give Harry a hard time, you'll have me to answer to. How touching, Snape sneered. But surely you have noticed that Potter is very like his father. Yes, I have, said Cyrus proudly. Well then, you'll know he is so arrogant that Christmas simply bounced off him. Snape said quickly. Cyrus pushed his chair roughly aside and strode around the table towards Snape, pulling out his wand as he went. Snape whipped on his own. They were squaring up to each other, Cyrus looking livid, Snape calculating, his eyes darting from Cyrus' wand tip to his face. Sirius, said Harry loudly. But Sirius appeared not to hear him. I have warned you, Snavellus, said Sirius, his face barely a foot from Snape's. I don't care if Dumbledore thinks you are reformed. I know better. Oh, but why don't you tell him so? Whispered Snape. Or are you afraid of he might not take the advice of a man who has been hiding inside his mother's house for 6 months very seriously? Tell me, how is Lucius Malfoy this day? I expect his delight. His lapdog's working at Hogwarts, isn't he? Speaking of dogs, said Snape softly, did you know that Lucius Malfoy recognized you last time you risked a little jaunt outside? Rare idea. Getting yourself seen on a safe station platform gave you a cast iron excuse not to lure hidey hole in future, didn't it? Cyrus raised his wand. No, Harry yelled, vaulting over the table and trying to get in between them. Sirius, don't. Are you calling me a coward? Roared Sirius, trying to push Harry out of the way, but Harry would not budge. Why, yes, I suppose I am, said Snape. Harry, get out of it, snarled Sirius. Push him out of the way with his free hand. The kitchen door opened and entire Weasley family plus Hermione came inside, all looking very happy, with Mr. Weasley walking proudly in the midst, dressed in the pair of stiff pajama covered by Mackintosh. Cured, he announced brightly to the kitchen at large, completely cured. He and all the other Weasleys froze on the threshold, gazing at the scene in front of them, which was also suspended in mid-action, both Sirius and Snape looking toward the door with their wands pointing into each other's face, and Harry immobile between them. A hand stretched out to each of them, trying to force them apart. Merlin Bird inside Mr. Weasley, the smile sliding off his face. What's going on here? Both Sirius and Snape lowered their wands. Harry looked from one to other. Each wore an expression of utmost contempt. Yet, the unexpected entrance of so many witnesses seemed to have brought them to their senses. Snape poked his wand and swept back across the kitchen. Passing the Weasley without comment at the door, he looked back. 6 o'clock Monday evening, Potter. He was gone. Cyrus glared at him, his wand at his side. But what's been going on? Asked Mr. Weasley again. Nothing, Arthur, said Sirius, who was breathing heavily, and though he had just run a long distance, just a friendly little chat between two of school friends. With that look like an enormous effort, he smiled. So you are cured. That's great news, really great. Yes, isn't it? Said Mrs. Weasley, leading her husband forward into a chair. Hiller Smithwack worked his magic in the end, found an antidote to whatever that snake's got into its fang, and Arthur's learned his lesson about dabbing in Muggles' medicine. Haven't you, dear? She added rather mincingly. Yes, Molly, dear, said Mr. Weasley meekly. That night's meal should have been a cheerful one with Mr. Weasley back amongst them. Harry could tell Sirius was trying to make it so. Yet, then his godfather was not forcing himself to laugh loudly at Fred and Jock's joke on offering everyone more food. His face fell back into a moody, brooding expression. Harry was separated from him by Muddings and Mad-Eye, who had dropped it to offer Mr. Weasley their congratulations. He wanted to talk to Sirius, to tell him that he should not listen to a word Snape said, that Snape was goading him deliberately, and that the rest of them did not think Sirius was a coward for doing as Dumbledore told him remaining in Grimmauld Place, but he had no opportunity to do so, and wondering occasionally, eyeing the ugly look on Sirius' face, whether he would have dared to even if he had the chance. Instead, he told Ron and Hermione under his voice about having to take occlumency lesson with Snape. Dumbledore wanted to stop you having those dreams about Voldemort, said Hermione at once. Well, you won't be sorry not to have them anymore, will you? Extra lessons with Snape, said Ron, sounding asked. I had rather have the nightmares. They were to return to Hogwarts on the night bus the following day, escorted once again by Tonks and Lupin, both of whom were eating breakfast in the kitchen when Harry, Ron, and Hermione arrived there next morning. The adults seemed to have been midway through a whispered conversation when the door opened. All of them looked around hastily and fell silent. After a hurried breakfast, they pulled on jackets and scarves against the chilly grey January morning. Harry had an unpleasant, constricted sensation in his chest. He did not want to say goodbye to Sirius. He had a bad feeling about his parenting. He did not know when they would next see each other and felt that it was incumbent upon him to say something to Sirius to stop him doing anything stupid. Harry was worried that Snape's accusation of cowardice had struck Sirius so badly. He might even now be planning some foolhardy trick on Grimmauld Place before he could think what to say. However, Sirius had not on his I want you take this, he said quietly, thrusting a bottle wrapped package roughly the size of paperback book into Harry's hand. What's that? Harry asked, a way of letting me know if Snape's giving you hard time. No, don't open it here, said Sirius. So Harry looked at Mrs. Weasley, who was trying to persuade the twins to wear hand-knitted mittens. I doubt Molly would approve, but I want you to use it if you need me, alright? Okay, said Harry, stowing the package away in the inside pocket of his jacket, but he knew who would never use whatever it was. It would not be here. Harry, who lured Sirius from his place of safety, no matter how fully Snape treated him in their forthcoming occlumency classes. Let's go then, said Sirius, clapping Harry on the shoulder and smiling grimly. And before Harry could say anything else, they were heading upstairs, stopping before the heavily chain and bottle front door surrounded by Weasley. Goodbye, Harry, take care, said Mrs. Weasley, hugging him. See you, Harry, and keep an eye out of Snake for me, said Mr. Weasley genially, shaking his hand. Right, yes, said Harry distractedly. It was his last chance to tell Sirius to be careful. He turned, looked onto his godfather's face, and opened his mouth to speak. But before he could do so, Sirius was giving him a brief, one-armed hug. He said gruffly, look after yourself, Harry. And next moment, Harry found himself being shunned out into icy winter air, with Tonks today heavily discussed as a tall, witty woman with iron grey hair, shoving him down the step. The door of number 12 slapped shut behind them. They followed Lupin down the front step. As he reached the pavement, Harry looked around. Number 12 was shrinking rapidly as those on either side of it stretched sideways, squeezing it out of sight. One blink later, it had gone. Come on, the quicker we get on the bus, better, said Tonk, and Harry thought there was nervousness in the glance she threw around the square looping flung out of his right arm, and a violent purple triple-desk bus had appeared out of thin air in front of them, narrowly avoiding the nearest lamppost, which jumped backward out of its way. Thin, pimple, jagged youth in a purple uniform leapt down onto the pavement and said, Welcome to. Yes, 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 we know, thank you, said Tong swiftly. Get on. She said, showed Harry forward toward the steps past the conductor who goggled at Harry as he passed. It's Harry. If you shout his name, I will curse you onto oblivion, muttered Tonk menacingly, now shutting Ginny and Hermione forward. I have always wanted to go on this thing, said Ron happily, joining Harry on board and looking around. I had been evening the last time Harry had travelled by night bus, and it's 3 days had been full of brass bedstead. Now, in the early morning, it was crammed with an assortment of mismatched chairs, grouped sadly around windows. Some of these appeared to have fallen over when the bus stopped abruptly in Grimlord Place. A few witches and wizards were still getting to their feet, grumbling, and somebody's shopping bag had slid the length of his bus. An unpleasant mixture of frog spawn, cockroach, and custard cream was scattered all over the floor. Look like we'll have to split up, said Tonic briskly, looking round for empty chair. Fred, George, and Guinea, if you just take those seats at the back, Remus can stay with you. She, Harry, Ron, and Hermione proceed up to the very top deck, where there were two chairs at the very front of the bus and two at the back. Stand to Pike, the conductor, followed Harry the Ron eagerly to the deck. He turned as Harry passed, and when he sat down, he saw the fact flick back to the front again. As Harry and Ron's handed Stan 11 sickle each, the first set off again, swaying ominously. It trembled around Gryffindor's chair, leaving and on off the pavement. Then, with another tremendous bang, they were all flung backward. Ron's chair toppled right over the Wigan, who had been on his lap, burst out of his cage and flew twittering wildly up to the front of the bus, where he fluttered down upon Hermione's shoulder instant. Harry, who had narrowly avoided falling by seizing a candle bracket, looked out of the window. They were now speeding down what appeared to be motorway. Just outside Birmingham, said Stan happily, answering Harry's unasked question as Ron struggled up from the floor. You keep in all day, Harry? I see your name in the paper lots over the summer, but it weren't never nothing very nice. I said, it didn't seem like a nutter when we met. I'm just goes to show dinner. He handed over their tickets and continued to gaze enthralled at Harry. Apparently, Stan did not care how nutty somebody was if they were famous enough to be in the paper. The night bus swayed alarmingly, overtaking a line of a car on inside. Looking toward the front of the bus, Harry saw Hermione cover her eyes with her hand, Midwigan still swaying happily on her shoulder. And chairs slid backward again, and the night bus jumped from the Birmingham motorway to quiet country land full of hairpin blend. It grows on either side of the road were leaping out of their way as they mounted the words from here they moved to a main street in the middle of a busy town, then to the viaduct surrounding by tall hills, then to a wide-swept road between high-rise flats, each side time with a loud bang. I have changed my mind, muttered Ron, picking himself up on the floor for the sixth time. I never want to ride on here again. Listen, it's Albert. Stop after this, said Stan brightly, swaying toward them. That fuzzy woman up front, oh, what on with you? She's giving us a little tip to move you up this pew. They had just got let Madame Marsh off first, though. There was more rating from downstairs, followed by horrible spanking sound. She is not feeling a best. A few minutes later, the night bus screeched itself out of the way, avoid collision. They could hear Stan ushering the unfortunate Madame Marsh out of the bus and revealed murmuring of her fellow passenger on the second desk. The bus moved on again, gathering speed until, bang, they were rolling through a snowy Hogsmeade. Harry caught a glimpse of the Hogshead down its side street. The board head sign cracking in the wintry wind. Flakes of snow hit the large window at the front of the bus. At least they rolled to a halt outside the gate to Hogwarts. Lupin and Tonk helped them off bus with their luggage and then got off to say goodbye. Harry glanced up at the 3 decks of the night bus and saw all the passengers staring down at them, nose flat against the window. "You'll be safe once you are in the ground," said Tonk, casting a careful eye around the deserted road. "Have a good time, okay? Look after yourself," said Lupin, shaking hands all around and reaching Harry last. "And listen." He lowered his voice while the rest of them exchanged last-minute goodbye with tongues. "Harry, I know you don't like Snape, but he is super clement, and we all, serious include, want you to learn to protect yourself, so work hard, alright?" "Yeah, alright," said Harry heavily, looking up into Lupin's premature lined face. "See you then." The six of them struggled up the slippery drive towards the castle, dragging their trunk. Hermione was already talking about knitting a few elf had before bedtime. Harry glanced back when he reached the walk front door. The night bus had already gone, and he half wished given what was coming the following days that he was still on board. Harry spent most of the next day dreading the evening. His morning potion lesson did nothing to dispel his trepidation, as Snape was unpleasant as ever, and Harry's mood was further lowered by the fact that members of DA were continuously approaching him in the corridor between classes, asking hopefully whether they would be meeting that night. "I'll let you know when the next one is," Harry said over and over again, "but I can't do it tonight. I have got to go to remedial potion." "You take remedial potion?" asked Jasper Smith superciliously, having concerned Harry in the entrance hall after lunch. "Good Lord, you must be terribly. Snape doesn't usually give extra lesson, does he?" As Smith strode away in an annoyingly fluent fashion, Tom glared after him. "Shall I jinx him? I can still get him from here," he said, raising his wand and taking aim between Smith's shoulder blades. "It," said Harry dismissively. "It's what everyone's going to think, isn't it? That I'm really stupid." "Hi, Harry," said a voice behind him. He turned around and found Charles standing here. "Oh," said Harry as his stomach leaped uncomfortably. "Hi. Well, be in the library, Harry," said Hermione firmly, and his eyes drawn above the eyebrow and dragged him off toward the marble staircase. "Had a good Christmas?" asked Cho. "Yeah, not bad," said Harry. "Mine was pretty quiet," said Chow. For some reason, she was looking rather embarrassed. There is another Hogsmeade trip next month. Did you see the notice?" "What?" "Oh no, I haven't checked the notice board since I got back." "Yes, it's on Valentine's Day." "Right," said Harry, wondering why she was telling him this. "Well, I suppose you want to." "Only if you do," she said eagerly. Harry stared. He had been about to say, "I suppose you want to know when the DA next meeting is," but her response did not seem to fit. He said. "Oh, it's okay if you don't," she said, look mortified. "Don't worry, I'll see you around." She walked away. Harry stood staring after her, his brain working frantically. Then something clutched into face. "Chow! Hey, Chow!" He ran after her, catching her halfway up the marble staircase. Uh, "Do you want to come into Hogsmeade with me on Valentine's Day?" "Oh, yes," she said, blushing crimson and beaming at him. "Right, well, that's settled then," said Harry, and feeling that the day was not going to be complete loss after all. He headed off to the library to pick up Ron and Hermione before their afternoon lesson, walking in a rather bouncy way himself. By 6 o'clock that evening, however, even the glow of having cheerfully asked out Chiao Chang was insufficient to lighten an ominous feeling that intensified with every step Harry looked towards Snape's office. He paused outside the door when he reached it, wishing though he were almost anywhere else. Then, taking a deep breath, knocked the entrance. It was a shadowy room lined with shelves bearing hundreds of glass jars in which floated slim bits of animal and plants. Suspended in various colored potions, in a corner stood a cupboard full of indignation that Snape had once accused Harry, not without reason, of robbing. Harry's attention was drawn toward the desk, however, where a swallow stone basin engraved with runes and symbols lay in pool of candlelight. Harry recognized it at once, Dumbledore's pencil. Wondering what on earth it was doing here, jumped when Snape's cold voice came out of the corner. Shut the door behind you, Potter. Harry did as he was told with the horrible feeling that he was imprisoning himself as he did so. When he turned back to face the room, Snape had moved into the light and was pointing slightly at the chair opposite his desk. Harry sat down and so did Snape. His cold black eyes fixed unblinkingly upon Harry, disliked each in every line of his face. Well, Potter, you know why you are here, he said. The headmaster has asked me to teach you occlumency. I can only hope that you prove more adept as it than potion. Right, said Harry fiercely. This may not be an ordinary class, Potter, said Snape, his eyes narrowed malevolently. I am still your teacher, and you will be there of all me, sir, or professor at all time. Yes, sir, said Harry. All clemency, as I told you, back in your dear godfather's kitchen. This branch, magical, seals the mind against magical institutions and influence. And why does Professor Dumbledore think I need this, sir? Said Harry, looking directly into Snape's dark cold eyes and wondering whether he would answer. Snape looked back at him for a moment and then said contemptuously, surely even you could have worked that out by now, Potter. The Dark Lord is highly skilled at legilimency. That, sir, his ability to extract feeling and memories of another person's mind. He can read minds, said Harry quickly. His worst fear confirmed. You have no subtlety, Potter, said Snape, his dark eyes glittering. You do not understand fine distinction. It, it is still shortcoming that make you such a lamentable potion maker. Snape paused for a moment, apparently to savor the pleasure of insulting Harry, before continuing. Only muggles talk of mind reading. The mind is not a book to be opened at will and examined at leisure. Thoughts are not etched on the inside of skulls to be pursued by any invader. Mind is a complex and many-layered thing, Potter, or at least most mind are. It is truth, however, that those who have mastered legilimency are able, under certain conditions, to delve into the mind of their victims and interpret their findings correctly. The Dark Lord, for instance, almost always know when somebody is lying to him. Only those skilled of occlumency are able to shut down those feelings and memories and contradict the lies, and so utter falsehood in his presence without detection. Whatsoever, Snape said. Legitimacy sounded like mind reading to Harry and did not think the sound of it all, so he could know what we are talking right now. So, Dark Lord is at a considerable distance, and the walls and the grounds of Hogwarts are guarded by many ancient spells and charms to ensure the bodily and mental safety of those who dwell with them, said Snape. Time and space matter in magic, Potter. Eye contact is often essential to legilimency. Well then, why do I have to learn occlumency? Snape sighed Harry, pressing his mouth with one long, thin finger as he did so. The usual rule do not seem to apply with you, Potter. The curse that failed to kill you seems to have forgot some kind of connection between you and the Dark Lord. The evidence suggests that my time when your mind is almost relaxed and vulnerable. When you are asleep, your instance, you are sharing the Dark Lord's thought and emotion. The headmaster think it advisable for this to continue. He wished me to reach you how to close your mind to the Dark Lord. Harry's heart was pumping fast again. No one this added up, but why does Professor Dumbledore want to stop it? He asked abruptly. I don't like it much, but it's been useful, hasn't it? I mean, I saw that snake attack Mr. Weasley, and if I don't hadn't, Professor Dumbledore wouldn't have been able to save him, would he, sir? Snape stared at Harry for a few moments, still tracing his mouth with his finger. When he spoke again, he was slowly and deliberately, as though he weighed even words. It appeared that the Dark Lord has been unaware of the connection between you and himself until very recently. Up till now, it seemed that you have been experiencing his emotion and sharing his thought without his being any of vessel. However, the vision you had shortly before Christmas, the one with the snake and Mr. Weasley. Do not interrupt me, Potter, said Snape in dangerous voice. As I was saying, the vision you had shortly before Christmas represented such a powerful incursion upon the Dark Lord's thought. I saw inside the snake's head, not this. I thought I just told you not to interrupt me, Potter. But Harry did not care if Snape was angry, and last he seemed to be getting to the bottom of his business. He had moved forward in his chair so that without realizing it, he was perched on the very edge, tense and poised for fight. How come I saw through the snake's eyes if it's Voldemort's thought I am sharing? Do not say the Dark Lord's name, spat Snape. There was a nasty silence. They glared at each other across the pensive. Professor Dumbledore said this time, said Harry quietly. Dumbledore is an extremely powerful wizard. Snape muttered, while he may feel secured enough to use the name. The rest of us, he rubbed his left forearm apparently unconsciously on the spot where Harry knew the dark mark was burned into his skin. I just wanted to know, Harry began again, forcing his voice back to politeness. Why? You seem to have visited the snake's mind because that was whether the Dark Lord was at the particular moment, sneered Snape. He was possessing the snake at the time, and so you dreamed you were inside it too. And well, he realized I was there. It seems so, said Snape coolly. How do you know? Said Harry urgently. Is this just Professor Dumbledore's guessing, or I told you? Said Snape, rigid in his chair, his eyes slid to call me sir. Yes, sir, said Harry impatiently, but how do you know? It is enough that we know, said Snape repressively. The important point is that the Dark Lord is now aware that you are gaining access to his thought feeling. He has also deduced that process is likely to work in reverse. That is to say, he had realized that he might be able to access your thought and feeling in return, and he might try and make me do things. Ask Harry, sir, he added hurriedly. He might, said Snape, sounding cold and unconcerned. Bring us back to occlumency. Snape pulled out his wand from an inside pocket of his robe and Harry tensed in his chair, but Snape merely raised the wand to his temple and placed its tip onto the grassy root of his hair. When he withdrew it, some silvery substance came away, stretching from the temple to wand like a thick gossamer strand, which broke as he pulled the wand away from it and fell gracefully into the pensive. There it swirled silvery white, neither gas nor liquid. Twice more, Snape raised the wand to his temple and deposited the silver substance into the stone basin. Then, without offering any explanation of his behavior, he picked up the pencil carefully, removed it to the shelf out of their way, and returned to face Harry, which his wand had held ready. Stand up and take out your wand, Potter. Harry got to his phone, feeling nervous. They faced each other with the desk between them. You may use your wand to attempt to disarm me or defend yourself in any other way you can think of, said Snape. And what are you going to do? Harry asked, eyeing Snape's wand apprehensively. I am about to attempt to break into your mind, said Snape softly. We are going to see how well you resist. I have been told that you have already shown aptitude to resisting the Imperious Curse. You will find that similar power are needed for this. Dance yourself now, Leglimens. Snape had struck before Harry was ready, before Harry had even begun to summon and forced forth resistance. Coffee swam in front of his eyes and vanished image after image was racing through his mind like flickering fire, so vivid it blinding him to his surroundings. He was 5, watching Dudley riding a new red bicycle, and his heart was bursting with jealousy. He was 9, and Ripper, the bulldog, was chasing him up a tree, and Dursley were laughing below on the lawn. He was sitting under the sorting hat, and it was telling him that he would do well in Slytherin. Hermione was lying in the hospital wing, her face covered with thick black hair. 100 Dementor were closing in on him beside the dark lake. Chao Chang was drawing nearer to him under the milestone. No, said a voice in Harry's head as the memory of Chao drew nearer. You are not watching that, you are not watching it. It's private. He felt a sharp pain in his knees. Snape's office had come back into view and he realized that he had fallen to the floor. One of his knees had collided painfully with the leg of Snape's desk. He looked up at Snape, who had lowered his wand and was rubbing his wrist. There was an angry wail there, like a Scrooge dark. Did you mean to produce a singing hex? Asked Snape coolly. No, said Harry bitterly, getting up from the floor. I thought not, said Snape fiercely. You let me get it too far, you lost control. Did you see everything I saw? Harry asked, unsure whether he wanted to hear the answer. Flashes of it, said Snape, his lip curling. To whom did the dog belong? My Aunt Marge. Harry muttered, hating Snape. Well, for the first attempt, that was not as poor as it might have been, said Snape. Raising his wand once more, you managed to stop me eventually, though you wasted time and energy shouting. You must remain focused. Tell me with your brain, and you will not need to resort to your wand. I'm trying, said Harry angrily, but you are not telling me how. Manners, Potter, said Snape dangerously. Now I want you to close your eyes. Harry threw him a 50 look before doing as he was told. He did not like the idea of standing there with the eyes shut while Snape faced him. Carrying a wand cleared on your mind, Potter, said Snape's cold voice. Let's go for all emotion, but Harry's anger at Snape continued to pound through his veins like venom. Let go of his anger. He could as easily dish his leg. You are not doing it, Potter. You will need more dislike than this. Focus now. Harry tried to empty his mind, tried not to think or remember or feel. Let's go again. On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, Leginimus, a great black dragon, was rearing in front of him. His father and mother were waving at him out of the enchanted mirror. Cedric Diggory was lying on the ground with a black eye staring at him. No, he was on his knees again. his face buried in his hands, his brain aching as though someone had been trying to pull it from the skull. Get up, said Snape sharply. Get up! You are not trying. You are making no effort. You are allowing me access to your memory, fear, handing me weapons. Harry stood up again, his heart thumping wildly as though he had really just seen Cedric dead in the graveyard. Snape looked paler than usual and angrier, though not nearly as angry as Harry was. I'm thinking an effort, he said through clenched teeth. I told you to attempt your self of emotion. Yes, well, I'm finding that hard at moment, Harry sneered them. You will find yourself easy prey for the Dark Lord, said Snape savagely. Fool, who wear their hats proudly on their sleeves, who cannot control their emotions, who wallow in sad memories and allow themselves to be provoked this easily. Weak people, in other words, they stand no chance against his power. He will penetrate your mind with a brusque ease, Potter. I'm not weak, said Harry in a low voice, fury now pumping through him so that he thought he might attack Snape in a moment. Then prove it. Master yourself, spat Snape. Control your anger, discipline your mind. We shall try again. Get ready now, ligaments. He was watching Uncle Vernon hammering the letterbox shut. 100 Dementor were drifting across the lake in the ground toward him. He was running along a windowless passage with Mr. Weasley. They were drawing nearer to the plain black door at the end of the corridor. Harry expected to go through it, but Mr. Weasley led him off to the left, down a flight of stone steps. I know. He was on all four again on Snape's office floor. His scare was prickling, unpleasant, but the voice that had just issued from his mouth was triumphant. He pushed himself up again to find Snape staring at him, his one race. It looked as though this time Snape had lifted the spell before Harry had even tried to fight back. What happened then, Potter? He asked, eyeing Harry intently. I saw, I remember. Harry panted. I have just realized. Realized what? Asked Harry sharply. Harry did not answer at once. He was still soaring, the moment of blinding realization as he rubbed his forehead. He had been dreaming about a windowless corridor ending in the locked door for months, without once realizing that it was a real place. Now seeing memory again, he knew that all along he has been dreaming about the corridor down which he had run with Mr. Weasley on house as he hurried mystery, and Mr. Weasley had been there the night that had been attacked by Voldemort's snake. He looked up at Snape. What's in the Department of Mysteries? What did you say? Snape asked quietly, and Harry saw deep satisfaction that Snape was unnerved. I said, what's in the Department of Mysteries, sir? Harry said, and why? Said Snape slowly. Would you ask such a thing? Because, said Harry, watching Snape closely for a reaction. That corridor I have just seen, I have been dreaming about it for months. I have just recognized it. It led to the Department of Mysteries. And I think Voldemort wants something. I have told you not to say that Dark Lord's name. Glared at each other. Harry scared again, but he did not care. Snape looked agitated when he spoke again. He sounded as though he was trying to appear cool and unconcerned. There are many things in the Department of Mysteries, Potter, few of which you would understand and none of which concern you. Do I make myself plain? Yes, he said, still rubbing his prickling scar, which was becoming more painful. I want you back here same time on Wednesday, and "We will continue work." "Fine," said Harry. He was desperate to get out of Snape's office and find Ron and Hermione. "You are to read your mind, all emotions, every night before sleep. Empty it. Frank and calm, you understand?" "Yes," said Harry, who was barely listening. "And be warned, Potter, I shall know if you have not practiced." "Right," Harry mumbled. Up his school bag, swung it over his shoulder, and hurried toward the office door. As he opened it, he glanced back at Snape, who did his back to Harry, was scoping his own thought out of the pencil with the tip of his wand and replacing them carefully inside his own head. Harry left without another word, closing the door carefully behind him, his scar still throbbing painfully. Harry found Ron and Hermione in the library, where they were working on Umbridge's most recent dream of homework. Other students, nearly all of them fifth year, sat at lamp-lit table nearby, nose close to the book, quill sketching feverishly, while the sky outside the mullioned window grey steady blacker. The only other sound was the slight squeaking of one of the Madam Quiz shoe as the librarian prowled to the easel meaninglessly, breathing down the neck of those touching her precious book. Harry felt shivering. His car was still aching. He felt movement feverish. When he sat down opposite Ron and Hermione, he caught sight of himself in the window opposite. He was very white, and his scar seemed to be showing up more clearly than usual. "How did it go?" Hermione whispered, and then, looking concerned, "Are you all right, Harry?" "Yeah, fine. I don't know," said Harry impatiently, wincing as pain shot through his scar again. "Listen, I have just realized something." And he told them what he was just seen and deduced. "So, are you saying," whispered Ron as Madam Prince swept past, squeaking slightly, "that the weapon, the thing you know was after, is in Ministry of Magic, in the Department of Ministries?" "It's got to be," Harry whispered. "I saw that door when your dad me down to the courtroom for the hearing, and it's definitely the same one he was guarding when the snare hit him." Hermione let out a long, slow sigh. "Of course," he breathed. "Of course, what?" said Ron, rather impatient. "Don't think about it. Sturgis Podmore was trying to get through a door at the Ministry of Magic. It must have been that once. It is much of a coincidence." "How come Sturgis was trying to break it when he's on our side?" said Ron. "Well, I don't know," Hermione admitted. "That is a bit odd. So, what's in the Department of Ministries?" Harry asked Ron. "Was your dad ever mentioned anything about it?" "I know they call all the people who worked in there unspeakably," said Ron, frowning, "because no one really seemed to know what they do in their weird place to have a weapon." "It's not weird at all. It makes perfect sense," said Hermione. "It will be something top secret that the ministry has been developing, I expect." "Harry, are you sure you're all right?" For Harry had just run both his hand hard over his forehead as though trying to iron it. "Yeah, fine," he said, lowering his hand, which were trembling. "I just feel a bit. I don't like occlumency much. I expect anyone who feels shaky if they had had their mind attacked over and over again," said Hermione sympathetically. "Look, let's get back to the common room. We'll be a bit more comfortable there." But the common room was packed with full of shrieks of laughter with excitement. Fred and George were demonstrating their latest bit of joke shop merchandise. "Headless hat," shouted George, as Fred waved a pointed hat decorated with a fluffy pink feather at the watching student. "2 gallons each. Watch Fred now." Fred swept the hat onto his head becoming more for a second and merely looked rather stupid. Then had hid, vanished. Several girls screamed, but everyone else was roaring with laughter. And off again shouted George, and Fred's hand groped for a moment in what seemed to be thin air over his shoulder. Then his head reappeared as he swept the pink feathered hat for it again. How do those hat work then? Said Hermione, distracted from her homework and watching Fred and George. I mean, obviously, it's some kind of invisibility spell, but it's rather clever to have extended the field of invisibility beyond the boundaries of charms object. I had imagined the charm wouldn't have a very long life, though. Harry did not answer. He was still feeling ill. I'm going to have to do this tomorrow, he muttered, pushing the books he had just taken out of his bag inside it. Well, write it in your homework planner then, said Hermione encouragingly, so you don't forget. Harry and Ron exchanged look as he reached into his bag, withdrew the planner, and opened it tentatively. Don't leave it till later, you big second later, ended the book as Harry scribbled down Umbridge's homeworks. Hermione beamed at it. I think I'll go to bed, said Harry, stuffing the homework planner back into his bag and making a mental note to drop it in the fire the first opportunity he got. He walked across the common room, dodging George, who tried to put the headless hat onto him, and reached the place and cool of the stone staircase to the boys' dormitory. He was feeling sick again, just as he had the night he had had the vision of the snake, but thought that if he could just lie down for a while he would be alright. He opened the door of his dormitory and was one step inside it when the experience began to serve. He thought that someone must have sliced into top of his head. He did not know whether he was standing or lying down. He did not even know his own name. Maniacal laughter was ringing his ear. He was happier than he had been in very long time. Jubilant, ecstatic, triumph. A wonderful, wonderful thing had happened. Harry, Harry, someone had hit him around the face. The insane laughter was punctured with a cry of pain. The happiness was drained out of him, but the laughter continued. He opened his eyes and, as he did so, became aware that the wild laughter was coming out of his own mouth. The moment he realized it died away, Harry lay panting on the floor, staring up at the ceiling, the scar on his forehead throwing horrible. Ron was bending over him, looking very worried. What happened? He said. I don't know. Harry gasped, sitting up again. He's really happy. Really happy, you know who he is. Something good's happened, mumbled Harry. He was shaking as badly as he had done after seeing the snake attack Mr. Weasley and felt very sick, something he's been hoping for. The worlds come just as they had back in the Gryffindor changing room, as though a stranger was speaking them through Harry's mouth, yet he knew they were too. He looked deep breath, willing himself not to vomit all over Ron. He was very glad that Dean and Seamus were not here to watch him. Hermione told me to come and check on you, said Ron in a low voice, helping Harry to his feet. She says your defensiveness will be low at the moment after Snape's been fiddling around your mind. Well, I suppose it will help in the long run, won't it? He looked doubtfully at Harry as he helped me him toward the bed. Harry nodded without any conviction and slammed back on his pillow, aching all over from having fallen to the floor so often that evening, his scars still pressingly painful. He would not help feeling that his first foray into occlumency had weakened his mind resistance rather than strengthening it, and he wondered, with a feeling of great trepidation, what had happened to make Lord Voldemort the happiest he had been in 14 years. That's it for today. Thank you so much. Stay tuned for next chapter. Till then, see ya. Bye bye.